Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Michael Dembrow from House District 45, Northeast Portland out to Park Rose, and I'm the chair of the House Committee on Higher Education and Workforce Development. With me are the two vice chairs of this committee, Representative Harker, Democrat from Beaverton, and Representative Huffman, Republican from the Dalles. Our committee has committed itself this session to removing obstacles in the way that Oregon students access higher education and workers access worker retraining, removing barriers that stand in the way of access, affordability, and success. On Wednesday morning, we'll be holding a hearing on a bill that will remove one of those barriers, the barrier of tuition inequity. House Bill 2787, the Tuition Equity Bill, is a bipartisan bill supported by a broad coalition of business and education advocates. And we're here today with Governor Kitzhaber and representatives from Oregon's statewide business organizations to discuss the important opportunity in Oregon to expand access to higher education and ensure that we have a well-trained workforce. Here today to talk about the bill are Oregon Governor Dr. John Kitzhaber, Oregon Business Association board member Andrew Colas, president of Colas Construction, Jeff Stone, executive director of the Oregon Association of Nurseries, Sandra McDonough, who's president and CEO of the Portland Business Association, and Greg Miller from Weyerhaeuser. And he's also a board member of Associated Oregon Industries. Now it's my honor to introduce Oregon's Governor, Dr. John A. Kitzhaber. John, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I built my third term as governor around a very simple premise that every Oregonian deserves their shot at the American dream. To me, that's a promise of equity and opportunity for all. It's a promise of opportunities for good jobs and upward mobility, and to live in safe, secure communities where people have a sense of belonging, commitment to one another. And if, as I believe, it is this promise of opportunity that lies at the heart of the American dream, then access to public education, including public higher education, is the vehicle through which that promise is most directly fulfilled today. Yet today, as you know, in this state, we have thousands of young Oregonians whose families brought them here, who have worked hard, who have gone to school, who've got good grades, who've graduated from high school. Exactly the kind of students we want in our public universities and our public community colleges in Oregon. Yet they're being denied that very basic promise of opportunity. And by erecting barriers to the educational aspirations of these young people, not only are we turning our backs on them, but we are walking away from tens of thousands of dollars that we've already invested in their education in our K through 12 system. Tuition equity allows us to capitalize on that investment. Tuition equity allows us to build Oregon's economy by drawing on the strengths and considerable talents of every young person in the state. And tuition equity allows us to fulfill our commitment to equity and opportunity for the next generation. So I'm very, very proud to join this coalition today to bring about a long overdue policy change, and I want to express my particular gratitude to Representative Dembrow, who has led this effort through several bienniums, and the other legislators who have committed themselves to this proposition. Together we can create equity and opportunity for a whole group of young Oregonians today and make our state stronger tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Now I'd like to introduce Andrew Colas of Colas Construction. That's C-O-L-A-S. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you, Governor. I'm very honored to be here today to talk about this very important issue. OBA is a very strong supporter of the state's 40-40-20 goal. We see this goal will ensure Oregon's on a strong economic footing with an educated workforce that can draw employers to the region. Tuition equity is a very important part of reaching the 40-40-20 goal. Without tuition equity, many Oregon students will never be able to get above a high school education and will not have access to an associate or bachelor's degree and the increased earning potential that comes with both. 40-40-20 is about addressing Oregon's workforce needs going into the coming decades. This goal is as much about Oregon's economic success as it is about Oregon's educational success, and we need tuition equity to help get us there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thanks to OBA for their support. I'd like now to call up Jeff Stone from the Oregon Association of Nurseries. Jeff, thank you.
Morning, everybody. Jeff Stone. I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon Association of Nurseries. I'm pleased, Governor, to be up here with you and representatives. I'm here to talk about the very real economic consequence of not acting on issues such as tuition equity. People forget that this has a very human, social, and economic consequence if inaction continues to happen. For us, we need to remember that as your largest sector of agriculture, we depend on a variety of different folks in the workforce, but this is also a good time to remind our citizens that people who are here who may be undocumented pay taxes, they are community members, they buy at your local stores, they have a very real economic presence within our state. So issues such as tuition equity is one that the nursery and greenhouse industry gets firmly behind. We also want to make sure that the direct correlation of kids who get educated actually get higher pay, are members of our community, and can make businesses, can create better families, can be better neighbors. And so we are grateful for the support given by this governor and by these representatives, and we fully stand behind the tuition equity effort this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Now I'll call up Sandra McDonough, who is Executive Director of the Portland Business Alliance. Thank you, Sandra.
Thanks, Mike. As Jeff and Andrew said, our focus is on job creation and improving wages and incomes for Oregon's families. And the most important starting point for that is education. We have in this state and many communities, including Portland, an unacceptably high high school dropout rate. We need to improve our high school graduations, and the way to do that is to show kids that there is a path from high school to post-secondary and then on to good family wage jobs. We know that the dropout rate is especially great with kids of color and kids who do not speak English at home. And so we need to focus on those students and make sure that they see this path. And this bill is going to help us get there. Tuition equity is very important to helping us prepare a workforce for tomorrow and to improve wages and incomes for all families in Oregon. That's why we're supporting it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. And now last, Greg Miller from Weyerhaeuser and AOI.
Thank you very much, Governor, and everyone for inviting us to this opportunity to speak on the bill. On behalf of Associated Oregon Industries Board of Director and the Executive Committee, AOI supports tuition equity legislation that extends in-state tuition rates to all qualified graduates of Oregon high schools, regardless of immigration status. Excuse me. Tuition equity legislation strengthens economic growth in Oregon in several ways. First, tuition equity is an investment in people, and that will strengthen Oregon's productivity and economic growth. We all know that access to post-secondary education leads to significantly higher wages for individuals and increased economic success for businesses. By providing this opportunity to more students, we're strengthening the state's economy. Second, tuition equity offers Oregon taxpayers a return on their prior investment in these students' K-12 education. Taxpayers should be allowed to realize the benefits of their investment by improving these students' access to post-secondary education and then reaping the economic benefits of their higher wages and skills when they graduate and enter the workforce. And finally, I am told that the Oregon University System's economic analysis of the bill tells us that it will bring increased revenue tuition to our public universities and will not displace any other students. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone. So you've heard why we need tuition equity. Let me just quickly tell you the major features of the bill. This bill would allow students to be considered resident for purposes of tuition if they meet several criteria, and they must meet each of them. First, they need to have been attending a school in this country for at least 5 years. They need to have studied at an Oregon high school for at least 3 of those years. They need to have graduated from an Oregon high school. They need to have been admitted by an Oregon university. And then finally, once they're admitted, they need to file an affidavit with that university indicated that they have applied for citizenship or will as soon as they're legally able to do so. And that, in a nutshell, is the bill. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
To you or the governor or anyone else who wants to answer this one, if House Bill 2787 passes, that removes a legal barrier, but like anything else, there's certainly a financial barrier to attending higher education. How do you propose to help these students once that happens?
Right. It removes a chunk of the barrier. It doesn't remove the barrier entirely. But what it does do is it allows students, by paying in-state tuition rates, it is within the realm of affordability to them. If they're also working while they're in school, perhaps they can get assistance from friends and family. They can make it work. We've seen that happen in other states. For them to have to pay the much, much higher rate that an out-of-state or international student would have to pay just puts it entirely out of the realm of possibility. And I didn't mention this. Perhaps you don't know that Oregon will not be the first if and when we pass tuition equity this year. There are 13 other states that have passed tuition equity. Some have had it for as long as 10 years, including Texas, California, and Utah and New York. And so we've been able to see how it plays out in other states. And what we've seen unequivocally is it makes a huge difference for the students in those states.
Should they get access to state-funded financial aid to help them meet that burden?
They will not. This bill does not give them access to financial aid, either, of course, federal or Oregon financial aid.
I can just, I think one other important point is we have in the budget, in our targeted allocations for our K-12 system, resources to help encourage students to gain college credit while in high school. And I think the fact that they no longer have to pay out-of-state tuition will encourage many of those students to take advantage of that, which in itself reduces the cost of college if you can take a year off by gaining credits while you're in high school.
Thank you, Governor.
Michael, if I without citizenship, they won't have they still won't have citizenship after they graduate, and it would still be difficult for them to get jobs afterward. How are you guys dealing with that?
Well, citizenship is a federal issue, of course, and many of these students will, in fact, be on a path to citizenship. And again, as we look at what's happened in other states, many of the students who have been beneficiaries of tuition equity have found their path to citizenship. In fact, we had a young woman who testified back in 2011, a really remarkable story. She's Californian. They do have tuition equity there. She was able to take advantage of it, and just as she was about to graduate from UCLA and attend Harvard School of Education for her master's degree, finally, after I think it was 13 or 14 years, her family's papers came through. They'd been in the queue that long. Many, if not most, of these students are in some sort of queue to get to legal status. And the other thing that, of course, has changed most recently is we now have the DACA program, Deferred Action, where students, most of the students who fit into this category will be eligible for short-term work permits.
If I can back up just a little bit, I wanted to add a little clarification to what the bill does and does not do. It does not provide free college. It does not provide any student financial assistance. And to give an example, I met with President Bob Davies from Eastern Oregon University the other day, which happens to have a line item in a statute that allows them to only charge in-state tuition. And so non-residents, non-U.S. citizens have already been allowed to go to Eastern Oregon University for in-state tuition. And I said, Bob, how many students does this impact since they're going to school on a cash basis? And he said, John, today we have 9 Hispanic students going to Eastern Oregon University. This bill does nothing, House Bill 2787, does nothing to change that or impact the college in Eastern Oregon one way or another. He anticipates he'll remain somewhere around 9 students.
I just want to just add something, sort of a protocol issue here. This is a bicameral legislature, as you know, and I think it's very, very important to acknowledge the leadership of President Courtney on this issue. He was a leader last session. He actually got it through the Senate last session, and without Peter's commitment to this issue, we probably wouldn't be as far as we are today.
That's true. On the House side, we have 4 chief sponsors, and on the Senate side, we have President Courtney. And I think we come close to adding up to him.
That's the right odds. I hesitate to go all the way into immigration reform, but since we're
kind of going there, these people also won't be able to legally drive to school under our current system. Are we addressing that this session?
Governor, would you like to?
I can't address it by myself. I would if I could. I think that bill hopefully will come up and will pass. I think the nature of the bill is still, I guess, in question, but it will be introduced. I think this is extraordinarily important, not only for these individuals, but particularly for significant segments of our economy, particularly here in the Valley and down in Southern Oregon. So I'm confident that something to address that issue will pass the legislature, and I will lend it my full support.
Jeff, would you? Because let me say there are a number of efforts going on, bipartisan, bicameral, to address that issue of the driver's licenses. And Jeff has been involved with them.
Leave it to the agricultural reporter to ask the question that forces me to come forward.
Trying to cover for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor. Well, the governor's support is obviously an important component. As I talked about, there are real human, social, and economic consequences for how we deal with a community of people, the undocumented folks in this state, to not only have the issue that's before you today, but to be able to get to work, pass the driver's test, be able to get insurance. And for us, for the largest sector in ag, having people be able to get to work is a priority. And so it is not easy to talk with a variety of different stakeholders, but I can tell you that there are really good folks, both sides of the aisle, all sorts on the stakeholder side, from farm labor to faith to law enforcement to ag to business, that are trying to get a bill that is workable and try to get that passed this session. So it's an art form as anything else, but I am highly confident that we have really good people working on this to try to get it passed. The nursery and greenhouse industry has put this as a top priority, and we'll work with this governor, with any legislator who wants to try to help us pass this bill to get it done. Any more questions on that before I walk away? So I don't have to awkwardly walk away and then come back up. Nope, we're good.
Thank you, Jeff.
I have a question for Representative Huffman. What's your indication of how much Republican support there is for tuition equity and also driver's licenses, both in the House and Senate?
Honestly, I haven't pushed my colleagues for an up or down, how they're going to stand on the issue. I do know that there is some support from the Republican House caucus, and We just had a meeting that I came from where I explained what the bill does do and what it doesn't do. And I think with my colleagues, as with people that I've been trying to educate this past week, a lot of folks that I call my friends out in Oregon think that Representative Huffman kind of wandered off the farm on this issue and probably driver's license both. But what I'm trying to do is get to the root causes that are affecting people. And I come from a perspective, last year I had 2 Latino town halls in Madras, which is in my district. And I've touched and talked to 300 to 400 Hispanics that have explained their stories to me. And when we were talking in the town halls about tuition equity, what really became apparent to me was these young people did not come here, they were brought here. And so we were talking about the immigration issues. For me, it's a separate issue. It's not an immigration issue for these kids that are going to be affected by tuition equity.
Yeah, thank you, John. You know, one of the real pleasures for me of working on this issue over the last few years is the number of students that I've gotten to meet who would be affected by this, who would benefit by it. And you know, as Representative Huffman said, these are all kids who were brought to this country. Many of them at a very, very young age. They have only known this country. Their education has been entirely in this country, and yet, despite enormous odds, they have been successful in school. You know, we're talking about class valedictorians. You know, we're talking about kids who volunteer after school, who are model citizens, who do everything that we want our kids to do. You know, work hard, dream big, and you know, be committed to making this a better Oregon. So these are very special people that would benefit from this, and Oregon as a whole would benefit from their having access to higher education.
It's going to have to be the last question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I have another question for Representative Huffman. Representative Dembrow mentioned the deferred action and the work permits, and I remember when this was debated in 11, a lot of Republicans were saying, hey, this is putting the cart before the horse because they won't be able to work. Do you buy into his argument that that question is somewhat resolved by the temporary work permits at the federal level?
I've got some questions about how things are going to play out also, and I had to leave our hearing early this morning. I was going to talk to Representative Dembrow this afternoon asking that we can have some folks from immigration and other departments that we can ask some questions and say, you know, how is this going to affect? One of the things that came up earlier is that the students aren't citizens. Can they become citizens before they graduate with a baccalaureate degree? Is it possible to do that? Is it possible for them to become a citizen without going back to their home country for a year or whatever? You know, these are questions that I think all the committee members would like answers to as we proceed, because we want these folks to have success. And I'm asked the question all the time, but they still won't be citizens when they get out of college. They won't have a social security number. And I say, I'm not so sure about that. You know, that I would hope that they would. I like to view them as pre-citizens. So I think we're going to get a lot of questions answered Wednesday morning.
Yes.
It's my hope.
We will have experts there to address those questions. And, you know, again, you know, we all hope that this issue will be resolved at the federal level sooner rather than later. Other states which have had students be able to take advantage of tuition equity for the last 10 years, they have a group of educated people who can immediately benefit by those changes if they're not already benefiting from having acquired citizenship. Here in Oregon, the longer we wait to implement tuition equity, the longer we're keeping young people in a state of limbo and, frankly, inducing them to go down a wrong path rather than the path that we want and need them to take. So the sooner we can get this passed and in place, the better off we will be.
Thank you.
Thank you all.